And today I'm going to show you how to gesso two different surfaces. This technique will work for an unprimed canvas like you see here, or an old painting that you want to work over, and I will also show you how to gesso heavy-duty watercolor paper. Gesso is a thick white paint and it primes your surface so that you can paint on it. Usually people will paint oil or acrylic on a gessoed surface. You can purchase a variety of different gessos, from less expensive ones to professional grade. In this tutorial, I'm going to use Liquitex professional grade gesso. Let's start off first with how to gesso watercolor paper. The benefit of watercolor paper is it can be less expensive than canvas, and it's really easy to store your paintings afterwards. Just make sure it's at least 90 pounds or higher, because the heavier duty papers are easier to work on with acrylic. Now let's prep the paper. So if you're using watercolor paper, what you can do is you can tape a border around the sides. The benefit of that is that it keeps a nice clean edge, and it also can keep the paper from buckling. So I will go ahead and just do that. And so I just use the width of the tape to determine how thick that'll be. And I usually don't get too perfect about it. Just go ahead and line that up the best that you can and press that on. You can see I didn't go to the total edge there. And the blue painter's tape is nice because it comes right off. So if anything, maybe go a little bit over the edge so you know it's covered. Press it down really well so you don't get any leakage in there. And then I just like to take this part and I just fold it over to the back. Okay, and we'll do that on each side. A little trickier when you have that nice rough edge. Just make sure you get to the bottom of that rough edge. Okay, so now you need your gesso, and I'm using Liquitex. This is the professional grade, but really any gesso will work, and gesso is just a primer. So we're gonna prime this paper so that it doesn't buckle a whole lot, and it just kind of prepares the surface for acrylic paint. I love these tubes because you can just go like this and be lazy, so squeeze some on there. And then I love the paint store brushes for this purpose. And then you're just gonna go ahead and spread that out. And try to make this layer relatively thin. Don't go, super duper thin. We just have a nice, decent coverage. And I would say you don't want to go crazy thick either, because then you'll see the texture of your brush marks more. And I like to kind of, get each side like this. And then to finish it off, I like to just go in one direction and kind of make it as neat as I can. And then we will let this dry. Don't overwork it too much. Like if you wait another minute or two, what will happen is this will dry. If you try to go over it, it'll just make a weird texture on there. So go ahead and put that aside. And now we're going to cover the surface of our other painting. So same thing, we're just going to squeeze our gesso right on top. And keep in mind that this painting has some texture in it because of what I did under it. So we're not going to be able to get rid of that texture with this gesso. And I've found in the past that sometimes the texture is great, and then sometimes it really inhibits me. Now you can sand your paintings. You can get maybe get a medium coarse, and you can just lightly sand. Be careful because, we don't want to push down on the canvas too much. It is cotton. That will take out some of the, bigger textures, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. I use so much texture in my work anyway. I know that I'm thinking this won't be too much of an issue, but we'll see when I get there. So you can see I'm getting the sides, and I'm doing that because I want this to be consistent. I want it to be all white. I want to start fresh on this painting. Now we can just kind of clean up our strokes here again, making sure we've covered everything. And in theory, with gesso, if you were gessoing a canvas that was ungessoed, so unprimed linen or cotton, you would do at least 2 coats. Okay, you would do a coat in this direction, you would let it dry completely, and then you would do a coat in the other direction. So you're making like a crosshatch. Because this painting has a lot of layers on it, I'm not going to worry about that. So this will just get 1 coat of gesso. Now, if you want to speed up the drying process, you can use a hair dryer. And if your canvas is already pretty tight, you want to keep it on low or medium heat. If it's really loose, you can keep it on high heat. And the idea is that you would dry and just keep moving around like this, because it will tighten the canvas. When you have a wet cotton shirt and you put it in the dryer, what happens? It shrinks. These stretch canvases are cotton, sometimes they're linen, both of them shrink. So you want to be careful. But the nice thing about acrylic is that we can dry this and we are ready to go within like 5 minutes. The way to know when your gesso is dry is to see if it's still shiny. So if I kind of move this canvas in the light, I can see that it's still pretty, there's a glisten to it, so that's not totally dry. So that I'll move over. And also that canvas is a bit tight, so I didn't want to over dry that. Now this, when I move it around in the light, I see for the most part it looks pretty dry. You can also double check by just lightly rubbing your hand on one area. The only thing is, if it is wet, you're gonna make a little ding in the gesso. So that's the drawback there. But I can see like this part is totally dry. This might not be because it's kind of thick. So I'm gonna ever so lightly, okay, yeah, that is dry. So then now I'm gonna do my second layer on this. And just like if you were gessoing a canvas that was ungessoed when you bought it, remember I said you do 1 layer, one direction, the next layer in the other direction. So we're like cross hatching. If you know cross hatching from drawing, it's like you're making crosses. So with the second layer, what I find is you don't need as much gesso because you already have some on there. So I'm going to do a little bit less on this layer here. So just kind of do that much and see what that does for me. And then you can actually keep your brush wet by putting a little saran wrap around it. So let's go ahead and do our second layer here. I could use a little bit more. Let's just do a little bit more here. Okay, so really make sure each area is covered, and then I will do the cross hatching. Now, why do you do that? That's probably your question. If you cross hatch as opposed to keeping it one direction, like you'll start to get like a really distinct texture in one direction, but if you cross hatch, first of all, this is the way it's done in the factory. You look carefully at the canvas, they've done it the same way. It just provides good coverage, and it sort of cuts down on the ability to have like too much texture in one area. And so now we just have this nice little grid. It's not perfect. If it's a pre-gessoed canvas, you know, it's a really perfect grid. Again, I'm not going to worry about the second canvas in terms of the second coat of gesso. This is plenty. I'm going to put a color on this anyway. So now we either want to let this dry naturally or blow dry it. And you can see I'm getting a little bit of buckling here. I wouldn't worry about that so much, and I'll tell you why. If you love this painting and it's something that you're going to actually, keep, and you're working on paper, you'll probably want to mat it and frame it, and that buckling should correct itself without any problem. But I'm not going to worry personally too much about this buckling. It's just part of the process when you're working with paper. So now we're going to get our paper and our canvas on the easel so that we're ready to start painting. So the canvas is just up here on the easel, nothing much to do there. You can see I've got a piece of masonite here. So masonite is like a compressed board, and they're really great to have. I like to paint with masonite behind my painting. It just keeps things more solid, and I like to paint it white so I have a pretty white, even surface. So with the paper, we'll just go ahead and tape that. What we can do is, now that we have this tape, we can actually tape over that to tape it onto the masonite. Okay, so don't tape onto the actual paper. You're just going to tape on the actual tape here, maybe come down about 3/4 or so. And then I might use masking tape instead of the blue tape. I think the masking tape won't fall as easily. Okay, so now we have our paper and our canvas, and we're ready to start the painting.